Hello.
So today we're going to talk about buzzwords. Obviously, marketing is very important for food companies and supplement companies, and they want to present the food as healthy as possible, whether or not it is. And so one of the best things you can do is know what those words are, know what they mean. That way you're not confused by them or manipulated by them. Because let's face it, you're always hearing to eat healthy. Eat healthy, it's good for you, it'll decrease disease, you'll feel better. And it's always being told to you by some good-looking person who's smiling. It looks like eating healthy is so much fun. And then sometimes you have the foods themselves are telling you to eat them to be healthy. It sounds so simple, but really is it? So to break it down, healthy food, we think of it having two things. It has a lot of nutrients and has a lack of stuff that's not good for you. So we'll talk about each of these terms in that context of whether it's healthy or not, or whether it's just a fancy word that makes it seem like it's healthy. So in an ideal world, an ideal scenario, this is where you're going to be in the supermarket, and your shopping cart is going to look like this. Because those are healthy foods. It's whole foods, lots of nutrients, not other stuff in it. But we live in the real world, and this is a common scenario where you're going to be walking through aisles of processed food. And the question is, will you be able to manage that wasteland of boxed foods, and will you be able to make it out with healthy stuff on the other side?
Will you make it out alive? Okay, so what's important? Okay, so to do this, we want to know what information on the box is and isn't healthy. Okay, so I know you've probably heard this multiple times, and it's sometimes can be inconvenient, but it really comes down to the labels. Okay, if we paid too much attention to the front of the box and the name and the colors and the cool tags and logos, it's not really going to give us the information we need to make informed decisions. We have to actually turn it over and read the ingredient list and nutrition index. So reading the facts about the ingredients and, again, knowing how to decipher them. So to start, let's look at some of the buzzwords that food companies like to use a lot and discuss which ones are useful and which ones are meant to trick you a little bit, okay?
Yeah, so the buzzwords will tend to pull you in the direction of something that's likely healthy or likely healthier, and then we'll talk about how to read the back of the box. That'll be for another lunch and learn. That way you know exactly what's in there, whether it is healthy or not.
Today's buzzwords, just like, again, we'll get into them, and then we'll have a whole nother one on nutrition label reading, getting more into detail about what those mean. So we'll touch on it today, but get in more detail moving forward. So some common buzzwords you'll see are things like this, right? Made with real honey, 100% natural. It's heart healthy, it's gluten-free, it's fat-free, sugar-free, all of those types of things,
Yeah.
right? So which ones are real and actually speak to the quality of the product, and which ones are just meant to lure you in a false sense of security to think you're eating healthy, but actually could be adding to your health problems and issues.
Yeah, you'll see sometimes the labels actually promote being low in something, and that's pretty much to hide the fact that it's really high in something else. And it's just the way they label it.
It's like a magician. Look over here while I'm, doing
Yeah.
my trick with this hand. Look at this hand. So it's kind of the same way with marketing, right? It's all a ploy to pull you in and make money for the corporations. But by being educated, hopefully you can have more power with your spending dollar and do things that are, again, moving you closer to health rather than further away. So who regulates this stuff? Who gets to decide what's healthy and what's not, right? Healthy.
FDA and USDA are two of the major players that are regulating food terms, and we'll let you know what they're saying about each of these terms, because sometimes it's what they have as far as their stipulations for that word is different than what we may think when we hear that word. And so we'll go over what it means in reality and whether it is something that carries a lot of weight or whether it's just fluff. You also have some third-party regulators. So you have different organic certification bodies. You have Certified Humane Non-GMO Project. You have a lot of different certification bodies that you have to kind of look at them and see how they're enforcing it, how they're checking it out. A lot of them, there's obviously variability. Some people even wonder if the USDA and FDA have teeth, so to speak, and whether if something isn't organic, what do they do about that if they find out that they've mislabeled? So that's always a question mark, but that being the way it is, we're just going to talk about what, what these foods mean.
My favorite part, we're gonna play a game, okay? So we're gonna need, I know you guys are eating and on your lunch break, but a little bit of give and take here. So we're gonna play marketing fluff or healthy stuff, right? So we're gonna give you a word, and we want you, we'll ask which of those does it fall into essentially? Which category would you label something like organic?
So is that really a healthy term? Is that healthy stuff? Or is it just marketing fluff?
So everybody who thinks it's marketing fluff, raise your hand. 2, okay? Everybody who thinks it's healthy stuff, raise your hand. Okay, the rest of you.
We will have a
So-
discussion about that because there's a lot of debate in gray area. So some of the reasons why you might think it's marketing fluff could be true, and actually things that even the people who think it's healthy stuff should be aware of and consider when they're making these choices.
So overall, given all of our education and all of the research we've done, what we concluded for the term organic is it's healthy stuff, which it formatted incorrectly, so I apologize about the Y on the other line. But the reason organic is healthy stuff and not just marketing fluff is because of the way that it's regulated and the fact that it does not contain herbicides and pesticides like conventional does. And those have been researched and known to link and correlate to inflammatory issues, other disease processes and problems, okay? So food production promotes the cycling of resources, ecologically balanced conservation, biodiversity, which is huge, right? For farming and things like that. Nutrients in the soil become nutrients in our food. And by killing nutrients in the soil with things like herbicides and pesticides, it doesn't make it to the food. So broccoli today actually has about a quarter of the nutritional value it did 40 years ago. Because we're not rotating crops. We're not keeping the soil nutrient dense to keep its product or our crops nutrient dense in themselves, okay? So organic is really essentially important, not just because of the herbicides and pesticides, which is great, but also biodiversity, keeping rotation, crop rotation, and nutrient density in the foods that we're eating so it makes it into our bodies, right?
So looking at what we talked about, what healthy food is, organic definitely has less bad stuff in it because you're not spraying it with the same volume and types of pesticides and herbicides, etc. And it also at times can have even higher nutritional content if you're doing the crop rotation, doing things that are going to help put more nutrients back into the soil, like farmers used to do, instead of just running through the land over and over and depleting it, which is what we commonly do now.
So for the 2 who said that it was marketing fluff, I completely understand where you're coming from because just because it says organic, everyone, does not mean it's essentially necessarily healthy. It's a healthier option, okay? Organic sugar is still sugar. If you're a diabetic, it's still going to spike your blood sugar. Organic fat is still fat. It's still going to potentially add to any issues you may have with high cholesterol or lipidemia, right? So we really want to walk that line where organic is healthy in the sense that it doesn't add harmful products, right? But if it's organic and then fill in the blank, if that blank is known to affect you or your health status, then obviously that's going to be an issue for you and it's not the most ideal choice for you, like organic soda, right? It doesn't have the stuff in it, but it's still sugar water. Does that make sense to everybody? That's why we chose that it's healthy stuff over marketing fluff.
Do you have any comments in the back as far as why you chose marketing fluff? Anything that we didn't address? Because it's a very valid thing to wonder, is it really something that's important?
Well, I think you have to verify it because just because it says organic doesn't actually mean that it is. And
There
that's
you
the
go.
question. How do we know that if it says organic, is there a seal that we look for?
Yes.
Yes.
USDA
So these are some seals that you'll see. The USDA organic is the most common one, and that's probably the one that carries the most weight. You will see other seals of organic that's saying that it's organic, and again, those, it depends whether that third party, how much weight, how much teeth do they have to be able to actually enforce it. That is a great concern to have, and it's good to be skeptical of what you're reading. Yes.
Well, the one place where you see organic in big words is in the produce aisle.
Mhm.
Do they have those stickers on those? I don't ever recall seeing stickers.
No, you
on-
won't see this. You'll see.
You won't see those stickers, but what you will see is their coding stickers, right?
right here.
So on the handout, you'll
bottom
see.
right.
That's how you decipher in the produce section or something that's a whole food that doesn't come in a package. This is how you decipher. Read down here, okay?
And the genetically modified on the right, that tends not to be labeled, just so you know. You'll usually see just the 4-digit number that starts with 4 for conventional, and if it's organic, it'll start with a 9, and it'll be a 5-digit number. That's how you
So
can
that's
tell.
how they regulate that in terms of whole foods versus processed or boxed foods, right? So all else fails, you're confused when you're at the section, you don't know which sign is pointing to what area, just look at the little SKU number or the sticker, okay?
Any other comments or questions about organic? That was a good question.
I know. What about, okay, all natural?
All natural.
Marketing fluff, raise your hand. Okay? Anybody believe it's healthy stuff? You guys are smarter than the average.
Who wants to talk about why they think it's marketing fluff?
It sounds just too generic.
It's a buzzword.
Yeah, it's a buzzword.
Doesn't seem like,
Feel good.
yeah, and it kind of does make you feel good, right, to see that. But is there anything behind it?
Like one of the ones that are sitting up there.
Mhm.
You could choose any one of those things. That one's probably the best.
This is
That's the
this says
highest
organic. Yeah, we'll have some pictures up here too, and you'll see. Yeah, so we agree. We believe this is marketing fluff. The FDA doesn't even have a formal definition.
No definition for all natural.
But their
None.
take is, as long as there isn't anything completely synthetic in it, you can call it all natural. But what does this mean about the processing? Say it's all natural chicken. Now that chicken might have been the most diseased, sickly, weak chicken, but as long as there isn't something, any synthetic ingredients in there, it's still going to be called all natural. It doesn't mean it's healthy.
So, and this again is post-mortem for meats, okay? So they don't add anything, just because they don't add additives or preservatives to the meat post-mortem, it can fall into all natural. When it was alive, it could have been pumped full of synthetic foods and fed antibiotics to fight disease. It could have been given hormones to grow twice as quickly as it naturally would have. So all of those things are not taken into account. It's the post-mortem effects of how they treat the product that they can qualify as all natural, okay? So really, you guys all got it right. But I still feel like sometimes we grab it because it helps us feel better, right, about that choice. But really, just be more cognizant of when you do reach for the all-natural, know, like, I'm calling BS.
It's better than not having anything on the label, but it still doesn't mean too much. And if you notice the USDA, it only counts for meat, poultry, and egg products.
That's it. That's
It does not
all
include
they
standards
consider
for
all
other
natural.
farming practices or for products that don't fall into that category.
So A+ for all natural, guys. Okay, next. Oh, and here's a side-by-side before we ask our next little question, just so you can kind of see what's allowed, what's not allowed, organic versus natural, and how they categorize them before they put them on the shelves, okay? So toxic, persistent pesticides, GMOs are genetically modified organisms, antibiotics, growth hormones, sludge, and irradiation are all not allowed in organic and all considered okay in natural, like I said. So during the rearing process, all of those things are totally cool and still considered all natural, okay? So again, that's a really great juxtaposition. And all the bottom requirements, animal welfare, cows required to pasture. Go ahead.
Where does sludge occur in
Like on the farm?
Yeah.
It's a lot of runoff, essentially.
So like the way they farm in Afghanistan, they use their sewer canals to water their crops.
That's part of it. Obviously, if you've ever, smelled some water systems when they're on or driven by farms, that sulfur smell. It's really not high quality, but it's a lot of times runoff as well, right? They're not recirculating that same water. The quality of water is lower. Things like that, because it costs a lot of money for farmers to use fresh water every time they water. I mean, it's like something like 60 gallons just to grow a head of broccoli or something over like the life of the farm. So to try and cut corners, a lot of people will just reuse that or use
Or
runoff.
just reclaimed water.
Exactly. And so that's where that quality comes into question there.
And that's something else you get with the organic, is not only the health benefits, but also the environmental benefits as well. And that's why a lot of people choose to go organic, is to preserve the one planet that we can
So you're helping
habitat.
your body and everybody else's home, really,
Yeah.
is planet Earth. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's so true.
So organic is definitely the better option. Let's look at a few of our common things that we'll see. So up there is just your regular standard milk. And then below on the left, these are your organic options. You have organic dairy milks, and then on the right side, we have some organic
Non-dairy.
non-dairy alternative milks. And who hasn't tasted an alternative milk from like an almond milk or a soy or anything like that? Everyone here has? Excellent. Yeah.
Big deal.
I was a huge dairy milk drinker when I was a kid. I loved it. And once I switched, it took some taking time to switch, but once I did, I haven't gone back. I think they're delicious.
Oh, okay, next is eggs. Okay, so let's look at the top one, vegetarian fed. Do chickens eat meat? No. Most chickens are vegetarian fed, so this is really misleading. Sometimes you'll see at farms that have chickens as well as other animals, unfortunately, animal byproducts, right, the leftovers from the processing will get thrown into the feed. So vegetarian does say that has never happened, but in most cases that's not a general practice.
Yeah.
So again, about 80 to 90% are vegetarian fed anyway because that's their normal diet, okay?
So it's a small step in the right direction, but really doesn't tell you too much and everything that you want to
Right.
hear.
So this is kind of a safer option. It actually says organic. It says that they're cage free, so they get roaming around time. Do they get to play on a prairie and live happily ever after? No, it's not as comfortable as it sounds, I'm sure, especially for them. But in most cases, they're not pumping them through, antibiotics and growth hormone to grow faster, to yield more meat and things like that. It's a lot safer in terms of ingesting for humans.
Yeah. So if you notice in the top left, it does say that it's no antibiotics, no hormones. So that's the good. The top left eggs definitely aren't terrible, but I would say definitely the bottom right are going to be a healthier choice. You're going to look for organic, and when it comes to eggs, cage-free. Those are two things that you really want to look for.
Now meat, okay, again, we just discussed the pre-mortem, post-mortem treatment of animals, right? So we want to make sure that before it even gets to the plant, the way in which the animal was treated was as humane as possible, as organic as possible. They lived as close to a life that they would live in nature as possible, right? They're allowed to graze, they're allowed to eat their natural diet, they're allowed to get exercise, things like that are all going to make the quality of meat better because it's less disease processes and less stress on the animal itself because you're eating tissue of a living organism. So, logic says that whatever would feed or go through, run through, circulate, blood, all of those things in that living tissue prior to it getting to your plate is going to be in that tissue you're consuming, right? So if it's a toxic animal, it's a sad animal, it's a stressed out animal, it's a diseased animal, you are what you eat essentially. So what we're trying to do is educate you to make better decisions so that what you are putting in your body isn't getting you closer to disease but closer to health, right? And this is a really big step. Go ahead.
I have a question. What about fish?
Wild, because they don't have, the difference is when something is grass-fed or cage-free in terms of animals being able to graze, it's the same as fish being raised or growing in their natural habitat. When they're farmed, it's very similar to the way that cows or chickens are farmed where they have zero room to move. Fish farms are very, they have the guppies, they have the minnows, they have the adults, and they're swimming in their own feces a lot of
A
times.
lot of times there's runoff, and you can see the color.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
exactly. And
You can see the color. We're actually going to have a side-by-side of the color. They artificially color the farm-raised fish to make it look pink, and it's still not as pink or orange as the wild caught. You can actually see in the tissue it's a huge difference. And if they actually presented it the way it looked when they killed the fish, nobody would buy it because it doesn't look like a healthy fish. It doesn't look like something you want to eat.
It's
So
too
yeah,
obvious.
wild caught for fish.
So they have to doctor it up. So wild is essentially congruent to cage-free, is essentially congruent to pasture or grass-fed.
Or
if that
free
makes
range for chickens. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I'll look for is free range. Again, sometimes this range isn't as luxurious as it may sound, but at least it's better than being stuck in a cage all day, indoors all the time. They have some requirements that are helpful. If you want to go a step even further, it would be humane because that gives them actual space requirements. They can spread their wings. They won't be disturbed if they're sitting in one place, over and over again. So there are more requirements for the space. Now for the beef, one second. Well, for the beef. What else would you like to see on this organic beef? So organic ground beef, that's a step in the right direction. There's maybe something else that's healthy to see.
It says no antibiotics and no growth hormones.
So that's all good.
Okay, so what else? Anything?
Grass-fed, excellent.
And why? Do you know why grass-fed is better? Is it just because it's something you heard?
It's their
Or
natural diet.
It's their natural diet. There's actually, they've done studies, they see changes in the tissues. So the saturated fats, the essential fatty acids are actually in a different ratio. So when it's on a grass-fed diet, the omega-3s, you've probably all heard of omega-3s, right?
Healthy fats, right?
Anti-inflammatory, good for the heart, good for pain. Those are higher in grass-fed animals than in grain-fed, where in grain-fed, it's the other way around. The pro-inflammatory fatty acids are higher. So just by feeding it grass, you actually get a different composition. It's healthier for us. Yes?
Like venison and elk and.
Yeah,
Wild
your
game.
wild
Yep.
animals, same thing. It's going to be leaner and it's going to have more of the good fatty acids, and not just by a little bit, by several times more.
Significantly more.
Significantly
Yeah.
more.
So again, people say, you know, they're paying more money for this type of food, but it's because you're getting more nutrients. So the idea is that your food is actually your medicine. It's actually treating any illnesses or deficiencies you might have by eating not so great and being stressed out. So you're not on medications and doctors and having an empty diet, but you're eating like this to get those essential fatty acids, to get that high iron level and all of those nutrients, like we said, with crop rotation and organic and things like that. So that's what's actually healing you and acting as your medicine, is what you're putting in your body.
Yes.
You had a question?
Wagyu beef? Wagyu beef?
Wagyu, where they massage them?
I mean,
I've heard of that. So it's basically like Kobe, but they massage the cow every day, which is what I've heard. So this is the rationale. As far as I understand, which please I urge you to always research if that's something you're interested in. But as far as what I understand is it comes down to the nervous system reaction. Okay, so if you and your friends were hanging out all day every day in this cool place, and then all of a sudden you're put on this trailer and you're confused and scared, and then you watch your friends one at a time in front of you get killed. I mean, animals are smart,
The stress
right?
hormone is going.
Their stress hormone, their cortisol, their adrenaline is pumping through the tissue, right? They're at this sympathetic state at slaughter, and so that's what's in the tissue, which we ingest. So the idea behind the massaging, as far as I understand, is creating parasympathetic, rest and digest. There's not that cortisol level in the tissue. There's not that adrenaline being pumped because they're so relaxed over their lifetime that when it comes to slaughter, and it's done in a more humane way as well, and it's done in what's called a desensitization way. So they load them up on the trailer and they drive off to the slaughterhouse and bring them right back. And they do that almost every day for a few weeks before slaughter so that they're relaxed by the time they get to slaughterhouse. They're not having that high stress reaction, right? So the idea is the quality of the meat is higher.
They tell
So-
everybody lives on a big farm now.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty luxurious, actually.
Yeah, right? I would have lived there.
It'd be a Wagyu beef.
Great question.
And you had a question too? Comment?
Oh, going back to the fish,
Mm-hmm.
I read, heard, or was told a long time ago, never buy fish that's a product of China because their waters are so polluted. Is there any truth to that?
You know, there is concerns about along Japan and China and a lot of those Asian countries, especially with Fukushima. Is that the reactor that's still spilling stuff out?
Radiation into the water and
Yeah,
things
so
like
there
that.
is concerns about getting fish in that area. And most things from China tend to have some sort of heavy metal in them, right? So there is some credence to that. How much you're actually getting, is going to add a load to your body. I don't think it's going to be something that's significant enough to cause like serious problems. But why take on more radiation than what?
I find I read the labels for that now. Whenever
Yeah.
I go.
Yeah.
Especially
As far as,
frozen.
obviously, it's hard to
I
find
mean-
something not from China.
Yeah, that's true in terms of, everything. pretty
Right,
much.
and
But-
it's all spreading now.
But
so.
think about transit time, okay? Fish is one of the fastest meat products to spoil, right? And so it's being frozen and slightly thawed on transit, refrozen, slightly thawed because you can't really, for temperature control with, just flight and trucks and everything it takes to get it from China to your local market. I mean, local is always the way to go because it's going to be the fresher, better, more nutrient dense version of whatever you're getting that's imported all the way from something like China. So California, Alaska, for us, we're really lucky that we're relatively close to a coast. So we shouldn't have fish that's more than a couple days old versus a couple weeks old. Does that make sense? So just like anything else, like week-old broccoli or week-old kale, it's not going to be as robust or have as high nutrient content. And what's cool, real quick, before we keep going, at Whole Foods, if you would like to, they have 1 to 6 levels of the humane versus cage-free, wild, grass-fed, they let you know this meat is a 3. It was grass-fed and allowed out to pasture, but it wasn't a level 6 where it could roam free like it does in nature, right? So the higher the number, 1 to 6, the more you're gonna pay, right? But at least you're more educated on where your meat is coming from and the quality of that meat, okay? So that's a really great tool to go off of, something like Whole Foods. Again, you're gonna pay more, but it's worth it.
And that's one of the things, real quickly, why I like to choose for labels in terms, even if they don't have 100% weight to them, because as you vote with your dollars, there will be more things in place to support you even more in your healthy desires.
Next.
Okay, all natural. So just to highlight, and the same goes with organic, but you can have all natural Cheetos and Ben & Jerry's.
And that's healthy food, right?
Yeah, it's natural.
Come on. I eat all natural. Well, what does that mean?
So, and the same goes with organic. They both can do this. So, organic, all natural doesn't mean healthy. All right, next one, low fat. Marketing fluff or healthy stuff. So, who says healthy stuff?
Okay.
Okay, who says marketing fluff?
Okay.
Okay. Marketing fluff won, and we would agree with you. So, here's what low fat means. It's 30
is why.
grams or less based on the reference amount customarily consumed. Now that part, that RACC, that's generally low. So they think that the amount of chips that most people consume is 7 chips.
That's a serving.
Yeah, that's a serving.
So that's low fat. If you have 7 chips and
Yeah.
it's less than 3
So
grams.
if you're eating 7 chips, fat is likely not your problem anyway. You're probably eating a pretty healthy diet if you can stick to the 7 chips. Now, here's the thing why it's marketing fluff. First of all, some fats, I mean, we need fats. Fats are healthy for us if we get the right kinds of fats. So low fat, if you were on a completely low fat, no fat diet, you wouldn't be healthy. And so going just towards low fat stuff isn't going to give you the whole story. It's what types of fats are important. It's about avoiding, especially the trans fats, and even avoiding too many saturated fats. Your unsaturated and your omega fatty acids, those are going to be the ones that are going to be the healthiest for you. So it's more about choosing the healthy fats. Now the other thing is, when they take fats out, fats are tasty. That's why we eat them.
Mm-hmm.
So how are they going to make the food tasty once they take the fat out? They got to put something back in.
What do they add? Sugar,
Yeah.
right?
So
Gotta
it's
taste good.
fat-free, but it's loaded with sugar or it's loaded with artificial sweeteners, which are, I would think, even worse. So just because it's kind of like the one hand's waving, the other hand is put in some unhealthy stuff.
So the way I want you guys to think about it is like oil to your car, right? You can't run your car without a good quality oil, and you have to change that every 3 months. So good omega fatty acids are the same thing. They help lubricate joints. They help create blood flow more consistently. It's when we have the saturated fats, the trans fats, that's what gets into the cells and causes hardening, okay, of vessels, cellular walls, things like that. It makes it hard for the cell to communicate with its environment around it, right, which makes the cell more toxic, okay? So again, it's really the school of thought of get rid of low fat and no fat, that ideal, and focus on what the fat is. Is it a trans fat or saturated fat? Then it's not great for you. If it's a healthy omega fat, eat it. Please, it's going to help you. Even if you have high cholesterol, you're going to need fat because chances are we can do things to get the bad cholesterol down, but we still need that fat, especially for like nerve transduction, brain, thinking, processing, all of those things. It's so essential for that.
Yeah,
okay?
fish oils actually lower, I mean, they're fats, and they lower your triglycerides, which are your fats in your body, and your cholesterol levels, because in the body it makes changes that deregulates how much you're making.
So see an example of this. Snack
Okay,
packs.
fat-free snack pack. So if there's any doubt that this wasn't a healthy option, you can see here, well, there's a ton of sugars in it. From one small pudding cup, you have 13 grams of sugar. That's quite a bit. You know, for diabetics, that's about half your allowance in that one
For
little
the
cup.
entire day, in
Yeah.
a tiny little
For
cup.
the entire day.
So again, when they take out the fat, what are they adding to make it taste good, right?
Here's another option. So dressings are usually, there's one of the big culprits when it comes to calories and unhealthy foods. So it's fat-free, looks good, but
Even
two of the
says
first 4
gluten-free.
ingredients, it's gluten-free too, yeah, great, double, you get extra benefits. But you see, 2 of the first 4 ingredients are sugars. And so there you go, that's how they make it taste good. Yes?
This was a question I was gonna ask you from the get-go, and now's the perfect time to do it. I was talking to a dentist recently about something, and they said, well, look, the first ingredient is blah, 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 which was bad for your teeth. So does that go in the order of
Yep.
The
all
amounts.
the way down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the first ingredient, when you're reading labels, just to know, is the highest concentration ingredient. The last ingredient on the list is the lowest concentration of that ingredient, okay?
So this is mostly sugar water, if you're looking at it.
It's like congealed, and this
Yeah.
one in between the two sugars is a binder to give it that thick dressing consistency. So it's a synthetic binder to make it thick.
But it's also starch, so it's
So-
also a carb.
It's a nice, thick, sugary syrup that we're putting on our vegetables to be healthy. We're healthy though, right?
Right.
Might have some fat, might have some fat.
Yeah, I saw like the buttermilk. Yeah, it's
And
probably not even
also,
completely fat free.
A good rule of thumb is if you can't read more than 3 to 5 of the ingredients, then it's probably not great for your body, right? I mean, can you read every single one of those and know what they are?
There's a lot of, yeah.
Right,
You need
so-
a chemistry degree to read this.
MSG was in there.
Yep.
Yeah, MSG as well, and some
Great.
people do not react well to MSG. All right, next one, sugar-free or no added sugar. We're gonna go with both of them because they both, in our opinions, have the same answer. So what do you think? Is this marketing fluff?
Okay, what about healthy stuff?
Healthy stuff.
Okay.
All right. The answer, we believe, is mainly marketing fluff. Oh, let me go back. But it's, especially the no added sugar, it's a good thing to see, but again, it doesn't tell you the whole story. So for sugar-free, less than 0.5 grams, this goes for for trans fats as well. If it's less than half a gram, which isn't that small of an amount, they don't have to label it. And so it could say 0 grams of trans fats, but it really has 0.49 grams of trans fats, which is why next month we're going to talk to you about the ingredients. I think it's next month, but one of these times coming up, we're going to talk to you about actually what's on the label. That way you don't have, they're not going to be able to trick you like they can on the box on the nutrition facts. So for sugar-free, again, it has less than 0.5 grams, but what are they putting instead? A lot of times it's the sugar substitutes. And Harvard did a study years ago that showed that people that ingested sugar substitutes actually gained more weight than those who had sugary products because it tricks the brain and it makes you more hungry, it makes you crave carbs because it's not keeping that communication. No added sugars is better, it's good. It means they're not putting extra sugar in there. But if you already have something that's very sugary, as we'll see, it still could be loaded with sugars. So let's take a look at a few. This is apple and blackcurrant, a fruit drink, no added sugar. And as you see in the label here, it's less than a gram of sugar. Okay, good so far. But we have 2 types of artificial sweeteners. And so you're still getting something that doesn't have good effects on your body, and arguably it's even worse than sugar. And so in this case, it looks okay, but what they put in instead is not good for your body. Same thing with this Jell-O. Again, should be no surprises here. The Jell-O is not a healthy option. It's sugar-free, but it has aspartame. And we're going to have a whole talk on sugar, how it affects your body, and also artificial sweeteners, how they affect your body. So we'll go more in depth then. Here's one. I actually had one of my patients who is diabetic talk to me about this. He said, well, I got a whole fridge of naked juices. Aren't those healthy? I said, well, they're healthy for me, but they're not healthy for you. And he said, well, how could that be? I said, because I'm not a diabetic. I can drink juices. He said, well, it says no sugar. And I said, well, what do you think fruit juices are? It's all sugar.
It's all sugar.
So what it was the no added sugar. And it looked like, oh, this is no sugar, it's sugar-free. But again, as you can see, it's far from. It's 24 grams of sugar for half a bottle.
48
There's
grams
2
of sugar
servings.
for that whole bottle.
48 gram.
You're a diabetic or even a standard healthy person, that's going to cause fluctuations in blood sugar. That will cause crashes. People think that, oh, it's healthy because it's a juice, but they don't realize that once a plant cell breaks open in the juicing process, it has an oxidative life of about 4 to 8 hours. So after that time, nutrients tend to oxidize and die off. So you're basically drinking sugar water.
Plus there's no water to buffer it. If you eat a fruit, it's going to be a lot different than drinking a fruit juice. Because the fiber is going to slow how much that sugar gets into your bloodstream, so you're not going to spike your blood sugar quite as much.
You know, when you eat the whole flesh, you're getting the fiber, the water, the nutrients, and the sugars. Where in a juice, you're basically just getting the sugar.
Yeah.
Everything else, the fiber is gone to the side. Everything, by the time it's gotten to your shopping cart in your house, everything is oxidized and dyed, right? Even when they try really hard by adding preservatives, we're still not preserving a lot of the nutrient content here, okay? So again, educating you on just because it says no sugar added doesn't mean it doesn't have sugar. They just don't add sugar to the already existing high sugar content.
Yeah.
Is that very healthy, that whatever it is?
Acai berry is great. It's very high antioxidant.
Where do you find it? It doesn't like grow in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really found a fresh version, but you can have either extracts or dried versions. And your best option for that is to look at Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, or Sprouts. They're gonna be most likely to have it. But yeah, it's not like a indigenous plant that you can
And
walk
it's not a
outside and find it
miracle.
growing.
It's not a
Find them
cure-all.
covered in chocolate all over the place.
Yeah, it's gonna be covered in chocolate. But all your berries are gonna be good. Pomegranates are very healthy, and that you'll find even in Safeway.
And I think this is our last question. So, gluten-free.
The big one.
So, raise your hand if you think it's marketing fluff. Okay. Raise your hand if you think it's healthy stuff. Anybody? A couple?
Ooh,
Okay. So
okay.
speak to us about, somebody yell out, anybody? Maybe you. Why do you think it's marketing fluff? Like, what's your perspective or feedback as to why?
Isn't it kind of used in the same vein as low fat, you know?
Yeah,
Okay.
it could be,
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
it could just mean it doesn't have any flour or wheat byproducts or anything like that in it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's good.
It makes
Right.
your brain think it's
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah,
But
I
it
think
can
a lot
be
of
loaded
people think
with
it's
sugar.
healthy. There's a high fat, gluten-free stuff out there that's not.
Yes, definitely.
Not healthy, yeah.
And there is a lot of buzz around gluten-free as well. Gluten's
Glutton.
kind of kind of is correlated with that. It's the new bad guy, right, in health. It used to be eggs were the bad guy and all these things. Now it's gluten, right?
It's like every 5 to 10 years we have a new bad guy.
Right.
It was carbs, so Atkins diet. Then it was fat, so everything's low fat. And now it's gluten, so everything's gluten-free, right? So after our research and what we know, medically speaking.
While we do agree with you in a lot of points, we will say overall we think it's healthy stuff. Now it depends on a few things. If you are celiac or have a known gluten intolerance, definitely healthy stuff. For the average person, even we have seen in cases either come up on sensitivity panels. It comes up quite a bit, actually, around 50% or more. I would say it actually comes up
60
where
to
there's
70 of my patients.
a delayed sensitivity. It's not a true celiac, which is a whole different response, but it is a delayed sensitivity where it is causing an inflammatory response. We see that pretty often. And then other people do feel better when they take it out. It may be some sort of mental thing. There's a placebo effect all the time.
Who knows, right?
But we do see a lot of clinical benefits from it. So for gluten-free, why we picked healthy stuff is that for some people, it really is healthy for them. And it's a label that you can depend on in most cases because gluten can be a serious allergy. So the serious allergies, they're very, it's stricter as far as what they need to tell you about it because some people can get, if you're celiac, that can ruin you for weeks and months if you have a little bit of gluten.
So I want to speak to that.
Yes.
Gluten-free as well. So the reason why gluten-free is an issue now isn't because overnight we all just stopped being able to process gluten, right? Okay. What it really has to do is, again, moving back a few steps, it comes to the raising of the wheat. We have a high level of genetically modified wheat, okay? So it's great because it's Roundup ready. We can spray herbicides and pesticides, kill bad guys, and keep the wheat alive. But how's that affecting the structure genetically of the wheat and how it reacts to our genetics and how our body processes it, right? So I was reading a study where they compared our wheat to wheat in Europe and New Zealand, okay? The quality of the wheat there in terms of the germ, how it reacts to inflammatory tests that we do for patients and things like that, it's exponentially higher because they don't use GMO, okay? Because genetically, they have had a long enough standing research to know that the way it reacts genetically with us or even metabolically is very pro-inflammatory. So even if you don't have celiacs, if I did a serum panel on you, I could guarantee at least half of you would have a sensitivity to gluten. Okay, so just because it says gluten-free, you're absolutely right. It does not mean that it is healthy across the board. When we say healthy stuff, what we mean is you can count on gluten-free being a sound, backed up quality label. that when it says gluten-free, it does not have any gluten in it, okay? They have taken that protein part of the wheat out because, again, the way that it's raised here and grown and processed in the United States is a lot more caustic for our bodies than it is in other countries, okay? And until we label GMOs and we, learn more about that research and kind of see fruition 10, 20 years from now what GMOs and how they affect us, because we're still kind of in the infantile stages of learning that, then we'll have a better, larger picture of how it affects us, right? But they've kind of perfected that overseas, and so we're learning from their research that, hey, if all else fails, remove gluten, see if that helps you feel better, and if it does, chances are you had a sensitivity and your body does not react well when you consume gluten, okay? Again, you're absolutely right. Not 100% across the board doesn't mean it's healthy, but it means it's definitely gluten-free and lacks the allergens that are potentially causing inflammation in your body. Okay? Does
Yeah,
that
on
make
top
sense?
of how it's genetic splicing is usually what people mean when they mean GMOs, but you're modifying the genetics even when you crossbreed. Crossbreeding has happened a lot in the past 100 years. It's a whole different crop right now than it was back in our grandparents' days.
Isn't it because it just grows like 10 times faster than it used to, and they can harvest?
They're harvesting more, they're more resilient. There's a lot of things that they're doing to make it a better crop for them, but it's not a better crop for our bodies. And even when they're producing bread and they use yeast, back in the days they used to use the mother yeast that was kind of more connected with that strain, with that plant, where now they use a totally different yeast. And so it doesn't digest the gluten as well as what they're finding as well. So there's a lot of different things that are altering the foods. And this is why, gluten didn't appear yesterday, but it's a different animal than what our bodies are used to.
So when it says gluten-free, don't count on the fact that it's inherently healthy. Just count on the fact that it has no gluten. So at least that inflammatory agent or potential inflammatory agent isn't in your food that you're consuming.
And the good thing
Does
is
that make sense?
there aren't gluten substitutes that are unhealthy like there is for low fats, where you're sure that they're putting something else bad in there to replace it. With gluten, it's usually going to be, it might be a rice flour, an almond flour,
It's like
something
brown
that's
rice, lentil flour,
yeah,
pea flour,
that's not going to
protein.
be worse for you.
Exactly. So they're not adding anything to make up for the loss of gluten because it's not like fat or sugar where you have to make up for the taste profile. It's more of a consistency when you lose gluten. Okay, so they may add binders, but they don't add tasty fillers. Okay.
What about like coconut flour, coconut sugar, coconut oil? That's so big right now.
Yeah,
And
a lot of coconut
flour
products.
has that gluten-free thing on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not on your list.
It isn't. There's a gluten-free.
Is it on the master gluten-free list?
If it isn't, add it to it because that's a good one.
I use
I
that
like
all the
coconut
time.
products.
Oh yeah, it's totally new.
Awesome, add it to the list. Yeah, that's coconut
Thanks
is
for bringing
gluten-free
that up.
and is a really good option.
Because honestly, essentially, that's what I primarily like to use. Now, to make up for the lack of gluten and the lack of gluten as a protein, it makes it really elastic and pliable, right? That's what makes dough go. So when you make a recipe to substitute gluten, a lot of times 3 to 4 different types of flour combined together synergistically have a better quality and consistency closer to legitimate with gluten products versus using coconut alone, amaranth alone, or rice alone. Kind of tends to fall flat, and I have experimented a lot, so I can tell you, when you mix
When
it,
you mix them along, it's like, yeah, I don't think it tastes it.
there's no rising, it's a little exactly, it's more gritty, so the more team players you have for gluten-free options, the better the consistency and quality, so.
All right, just about done.
That was a great addition, by the way, thank you for that coconut. So we're just gonna look at some labels, and then we'll wrap it up so you guys can get back to work, so.
So anything that has wheat in it is going to have gluten, but you'll also see at the bottom, it'll explicitly say whether it has wheat or not, because that's one of the major allergens. So just like egg, they have to put it explicitly that it's in there if it is there. So they have to give you the allergy information, whether or not it may not have gluten or wheat, but it may be produced in a factory that also produces wheat, and when it's in the air, it does get into the food.
It can contaminate it still. So again, sensitivity, you don't have to be as hypersensitive to the produced in a plant. But if you do have celiacs or you know someone who has celiacs, it's a big deal, okay? Cross-contamination can genuinely affect them. I've seen people just sit down where a wheat pancake fell in a booth. They wiped it down. A kid sat down to have lunch and had a rash all over their bottom because there was still wheat contact with their skin, and that is a high level celiac, okay? So this is a big deal. The way that wheat's being grown and processed for us is really causing problems. So again, just because for people like you without celiacs, you can probably have something gluten-free that still was produced in a plant with wheat, right? But if you know someone with celiacs, definitely avoid products, even if it's associated to the plant process and manufacturing. Does that make sense? Okay.
And you'll see it on the label. They can't get around it. Here's another example. It's packaged in a plant that also produces wheat and gluten. So it'll have to be on the label somewhere. It's not hard to find. These are some we would consider healthy
Healthier.
options. Yeah, healthier as far as we like these companies in general. A lot of these are organic as well. And these are good options when it comes to gluten-free. Again, I like to choose gluten-free when given the option. If I'm going to have a cracker that has flour, one that's gluten-free, I choose the gluten-free just because I've seen it so much as far as cause even just some irritation that's going to add up. And I think the gluten-free options for certain things taste just as good, especially like crackers. But of course, just like anything else, just the buzzword doesn't mean much
Marketing
because you can
fluff.
have
You
your
guys were right
you
with
can
this
have your
stuff.
gluten-free Cocoa Puffs, and it's still not going to be doing good for your body.
Gluten-free Betty Crocker cookies.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, a lot of the trans fats are still in there, a lot of the sugars and sugar additives, a lot of the byproducts and, what's the word I'm looking for? Preservatives, right? It just doesn't contain gluten. Should we buzz them? You want to learn about buzzwords too?
So in conclusion, you have some buzzwords, all buzzwords are marketing, and it's all there to try to get you to purchase their product. And so your job is to be empowered and to not fall for their little games. Whole foods are going to be your best option, as close to the farm as possible, but obviously we live in a reality where our lives are quicker paced, and sometimes we want to get our meal quicker and out of a box, and that's okay, as long as you make your healthier options. We went over the buzzwords that are going to be better, like organic, even gluten-free, we believe is going to be better, whereas all natural, low fat, no added sugar, those aren't going to help you as much.
Delve a little deeper on the ingredient list if all else fails, if you're called into question, okay? Again, if you can't read more than half the ingredients, if the ingredients you know are trans fat, saturated fats, high sugar content, things like that, safe than sorry, put it back on the shelf and look for a better alternative. It's going to take a little longer at the grocery store, but you'll notice the positive benefits once you get home and start eating a more healthy diet.
Yeah.
You got a question?
What about farmers markets?
I believe those are really good. You get to meet the people that are actually producing the food. You can even go to their farms. I go to Red Mountain Cattle Company, which is off of the 202. I went to his farm. I went to see how he raised the animals, what he does for them. And, he can't be, it's hard for him to be lying at that point if I'm right there on the farm.
You see them around everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a trendy thing or if they're actually,
No.
farmers are actually.
We've got
Actually
co-ops
farmers,
out in
Yes,
the area.
exactly.
Co-ops, yeah.
So you have co-ops and you have farmers markets. Farmers markets, they all come together, and this is what we have to sell that we got from the farm this morning. Co-ops are more like you sign up and you say, hey, I'm going to commit to 6 or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever your growing season is, to get a bundle every week of your yield, okay? I'm going to pay up front $300, and for 8 weeks, you're going to deliver a nice big basket of your fresh produce, your seasonal produce to my
Mixed stuff.
house or to a pickup area that I'm going to drive to and pick up, and I know where it came from and the fact that it's local. So on a couple levels, the reason why local is better, A, it's grown with the seasons. We're not shipping in coconuts or pineapples in the middle of December. That's just not how that works with the seasons, right? So you're eating seasonally. The reason why plants have seasons is because we have seasons. Berries are high in antioxidants. They tend to be great summer foods, right? Spring and summer. Why? There's more sun, oxidative stress, sun exposure. We need more antioxidants in our diet to combat that. Does that make sense? Root vegetables tend to be heartier. We eat stews and things in the winter, right? Because it's cold and we need more of the niacins and the B vitamins and things like that for energy. Well, they're high in root vegetables, and that tends to be seasonal for that. So eating locally in farmers markets and co-ops are a great way to eat with the seasons because our bodies dictate the seasons too. Like we work with nature, right? In addition, which I'm a huge advocate of, is supporting your local farmer, right? These people generations and generations of people growing and perfecting the yield of their farm and what they're producing and putting out into the world. And so going right down the street versus getting something that's been shipped in on a truck or a train from Mexico for a week is going to be a lot different for how it affects our body and the nutrients that it yields. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, plus I think a lot of us like to support the little guy, the mom and pop's
At least I
stores
do.
and
Yeah.
Have you heard of Bountiful Basket?
Yes.
Yep.
The school, yeah, the medical school has a lot of the students. It's a CSA. It's a community sustained agriculture. It's very similar to a co-op. Bountiful Baskets is great. So it's resources like that. You just go online, sign up, and it's almost like you don't even have to think about it. You just get a basket of fresh fruits and vegetables every week from a local farm, eating in season, and you know it's organic, you know? So that's a great way to maintain healthy eating without having to do a whole lot of effort going to the store and deciphering what's healthy and what's not. And it makes you explore more options because I've never gotten bok choy at the grocery store, but I got it in my basket this week. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to get creative and try and make it into something I've never had before. So
I found buying from farmers markets a lot cheaper too.
Yeah, it
so
is.
much cheaper.
10 times as many jalapenos from one of those.
Right.
In the store.
And a lot of times they'll cut you deals too.
Mhm.
You know, I don't like haggle or barter or anything, but they will say, okay, let's round it down. It's just a nice, I find it to be very cheap.
Yeah, for the calculator.
With the yeah, exactly.
And the stores too are very aesthetic. Does it look like an apple from a coloring book? Does it look perfect like it's from a commercial or something? Because that's the only apple we're going to accept. Where farmers markets, yeah, it might be a little shaped oddly or uniquely or different. So you're going to get it a lot cheaper because guess what? The stores aren't picking that up. You get that option there. So you get like the two-pronged carrot instead of a nice single, perfectly, you know, picturesque carrot. So, you know, it's things like that too that also make it cheaper and more available.
Okay, any other questions? Awesome, well thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something about buzzwords. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Stop and save.
Mm-hmm.